Before I start this video, because it is unscripted, and this comes off the heels of doing some research for a video that is likely going to be scripted, but is going to take a bit more time, a lot more time probably. This is not a video about Bionicle, I want to mention. This is going to be covering some heavy topics. And I want to start this video with the recommendation of another. Because there's another YouTuber here that put out a fantastic video a couple of months ago under the name of Shaun, S-H-A-U-N. And the video is about Palestine. If you know anything about me, I am a leftist. I am somebody who lives in the Midwestern United States. I've not ever left this country, but I consider myself a progressive by whatever that may mean, in the sense that I hold in high regard sympathy towards my fellow human. Whether or not we agree, whether or not we want the same things, I just want to be able to coexist with people in whatever flavor they come in. So before I start this video, I wanted to throw this up on screen because this almost broke me into tears. I've read it a couple of times. Before I pull it up, let me read you the name of the author of a poem, Khalid Juma, from 2014, and this poem is called "O Rascal Children of Gaza." You can pause and you read it if you want. I don't want to read it. I can't. I can relate to this in some ways as someone who records, because I do have neighbors that are quite loud, usually not the children, thankfully. And as an introvert, I think I also have maybe a deeper relationship to it than I otherwise would. I can't know that. But I am somebody who enjoys my alone time, my being able to record in peace. And if I knew that where I lived right now was under control, under attack, under siege, and the people around me were disappearing, that I myself could be disappeared, I don't know how I would feel. But I know I would miss the land that I'm on. I don't live in a pretty area, but I do find beauty in the land. I find beauty when I walk down my hallway catching a glimpse of the setting sun just dancing through the trees. I was out there taking pictures of it just the other day. And I do find beauty in hearing the children play next door. To not have that, to have that humanity, that aspect of myself taken away, what would be left to live for, you know? Anyway. So the reason I wanted to make this video was because I wanted to talk about, if you, like me, are from the United States, something that has been just bombarding the media circle these past couple of weeks, in part to distract us from what's going on in Gaza, which, for all intents and purposes, yes, is a genocide of a population, and it's been going on long before October 7th. Anybody who paints the image, the idea that October 7th was the beginning of this, is lying to you, because they know already that it's not. Free Palestine has been a slogan that's been around for my entire life, and it's been a necessity since the creation of Israel, in all honesty. And again, if you do not know that history, I would recommend Shaun's video, because he will go over some of it, and he will recommend some more sources as well that I would absolutely recommend checking into. Currently, our media is pushing the idea of these widespread anarchist style, I guess, of, I want to say riots, but protests going on college campuses. I don't know if any of them have called them a riot yet, so I don't want to use that term incorrectly. But they are covering it kind of like it is one. Because the media is not covering this from both sides. It doesn't want to. It doesn't play to what it is trying to do. And I'm talking specifically about legacy media, media that you would often find on TV, whether it be your local news or more broad stream shows, networks, broadcasts, whatever you want to call those. Point being, generally online, the atmosphere around this information is very different. And I want you to remember that where I live, the United States has a history of this. We weren't fond of the civil rights movement when it was going on, especially not initially. We were very resistant to it, in fact. In many ways trying to subvert it from happening, but it moved on, as it should. The same is true about Vietnam as well. Many people who participated in those protests were called, communists and things like that. And it's disgusting because all they wanted to see was peace in an area that they didn't know. The same is true today. And I think the thing that gets me, that rubs me the wrong way, is this notion that this country is unique in the sense that it has outgrown its past sins, as though someone living in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, who maybe was racist then, maybe fought against the civil rights movement then, couldn't have held that same belief into today. We know that individuals can do that, so why not a country as well? Yeah, they might move on with the times, they might admit or understand or hesitantly come to the conclusion that these people are free now, but doesn't mean that they like it or support it. And the same is true here as well. The coverage that has been displayed on media that I have seen has been despicable and has been in just heinous disregard to the role that I believe this media is supposed to play, to inform an audience, but it's not really the intent. Media doesn't try to inform you, so to speak, legacy media at the very least, but rather it aims to make you complicit in their narrative. They hold the brush and they make you watch as they paint what they want you to see. But it's plainly obvious what's actually there if you're involved, if you're affected. A lot of what I've seen has painted these protests as violent clashes, implying that there's no instigator to these incidents, when very clearly there are, because most of these incidents take place between three parties. Police. I guess you could say four parties, really, because also the college elite, the people who are in ownership of these campuses. I'm not talking about faculty members, though, of course, some of those are involved on both sides, but specifically the owner class of these colleges, who have a very specific agenda in their support for Israel in many cases. The police, who have a duty in one regard, or I guess a perceived duty in one regard to protect this property, right? But also who are more than complicit in a lot of ways to their behavior and the actions that they let slide versus the actions that they're willing to stop, sometimes at the hand of violence. And that's important because the other two parties are the pro-Palestinian protesters and the pro-Israeli counter-protesters. And I make a distinction here because they're not protests on both sides. A lot of these pro-Israeli counter-protests involve the instigation of violence on their part. Many of these anti-counter-protesters pulling pro-Palestinian protesters, and I know this is getting redundant, I do apologize for that, but out of these lines and beating them, pepper spraying them, hitting them with poles and things like that. And remember, a lot of this is happening with police on standby, at location. Those aren't the actions getting stopped by police. So what are? It's the pro-Palestinian protesters. Because although I can't imagine that these counter-protesters and police necessarily agree on everything, some of these counter-protesters are probably, likely, white nationalists and Zionists as well. Not all, of course. And not all pro-Palestinian protesters may be good. I'm not there. I can't just make that distinction right away. It would be very ignorant of me to do so and irresponsible to just pretend to paint with a broad brush that any one group of people is bad, and just as bad to paint with a broad brush that any one group of people is solely good. We're all human. We're all individuals. Agents of our own decisions, right? But it gets me because the framing that the media puts forward of clashes, showing police breaking down barriers, implies that they're doing so against violence. These are the images that we see from, in a lot of cases, war zones. Because that's the images that want to be spread, that they want to spread. The interviews with individual Jewish students, pulling them out, singling them out, picking the interviews where those students sound worried. And rightfully so in some cases. When the media keeps telling you that your life is at risk, inevitably some portion of your population is going to believe your life is at risk. And it's not to downplay anybody whose life is. But understand what they're doing here. It's a product of their own making. But they're not pulling out the counter-protesters who are harming these individuals, oftentimes without arrest. They aren't pulling out the pro-Palestinian Jewish supporters in most cases, because there's a specific narrative to be pushed here. Again, understand that not all of the pro-Palestinian protesters are Palestinian themselves. I would probably argue that most of them are not. And it's just as true that not all of the counter-protesters are Jewish. And it's also true, at least to some regard, I have to imagine, that they exist on both sides. Again, I'm not there. I don't know the numbers. The point of this video is to talk about media narrative. And just to tell you, whatever information you're being fed, if it sounds passive, if it's obfuscating aspects of the events that take place, clash happens. Okay, who started this clash? Why was this clash? Did this clash take place? I listened to a piece of media earlier that said that the police had stormed and tear gassed several students under reports of potential violence breaking out. I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say reports. Basically, they had gotten a tip or something of potential violence. That would be like justifying police beating a civilian because they could potentially be a murderer. You know, like, that's not how the laws in our country are supposed to work. And the same should apply here too. It's blatant how much disregard there is for what's going on. And the crazy thing is, the information's out there. These kids are not just kids that exist in the 1950s. They have cell phones. They're intelligent. They're capturing this too. And they're sharing this footage in its entirety a lot of the times, and near immediately, before any bias could set in, before any videos could be edited. And they're just showing it to you. And a lot of what the media is showing you has been curated, edited, to push a narrative. So this video isn't here to convince you to support one side or the other. You know where I stand. But it's just to push you to think diligently about where you place your support. To approach those that you may disagree with, that you might find a nuisance, you might consider rascals. There's an opportunity in the future where they could be gone. Due maybe not in part due to your actions, but to the actions of someone you might support. And by the time you come around to realize that maybe the people who've been taken away had it right the whole time, it's too late. And history's been narrativized to make it seem as though, no, actually, we were on the right side the whole time. That's rarely ever been the case. And it's unfortunate. I want to be proud of the US. I want to be proud of this country. I want to be proud when I vote that I'm voting for an administration that is not going to support with its tail between its legs, a genocide going on in a country that's been in peril since the creation of Israel. Again, refer to the video that I've talked about and mentioned, linked in the description. So anyway, there would be no possible way that a video like this would be monetized anyway, but it's not going to be monetized. Not if there are any ads on it, it's because YouTube threw them on there, not me. If you want to support this channel, I leave that up to you. I do have a Patreon down in the description below. I do have Instagram as well. I just ask you to be cordial, be respectful, especially of people in the comments. And the Discord server is for, Bionicle stuff, not really this type of conversation. So I wouldn't really recommend going over there because of a video like this, unless you're interested in Bionicle stuff, I guess. And yeah, just, I don't know what else to say. That's it. So I guess if you'd like to subscribe, I appreciate it. Take care.